All right, everyone, today we're diving deep into Kubernetes resource management. And Jordan, I have to ask, you just published that paper claiming most companies waste 32% of their cloud spend. That's a pretty massive number.
It's actually worse than that, Sam. The latest Flexera 2024 State of Cloud report shows 75% of organizations have seen an increase in cloud waste, with an average of 32% of cloud budgets going to waste. We're talking about $44.5 billion in wasted infrastructure spend projected for 2025 alone.
Wait, hold on. Those are aggregate numbers across all cloud services. 78% of companies estimate that 21 to 50% of their cloud expenditure is wasted annually. But what about the startup, with 5 developers trying to keep their Kubernetes cluster alive?
Thank you, Alex. Jordan, your research always focuses on these enterprise numbers. I've been at 3 startups where we literally crashed our production environment because some consultant told us to right-size our pods based on Netflix's playbook.
But Riley, the principles scale down. Even small companies can implement resource requests and limits.
Principles? Dude, we had 30 seconds to spin up resources during our product launch. Your principles don't work when your entire business depends on not going down and you're burning $5,000 a month on AWS.
Riley's hitting on something crucial here. 15% of companies report monthly losses exceeding $75,000 due to cloud waste. But that's meaningless if your entire monthly cloud budget is $3,000.
Let's dive into that. Riley, tell us about that product launch incident. What actually happened?
We were running this fintech app for small business loans. Tiny company, maybe 12 employees. Traffic usually peaks at like 200 concurrent users. Launch day. We hit 8,000 in the first 2 hours because TechCrunch picked up our story.
That's a 40x spike. Did you have horizontal pod auto-scaling configured with proper resource requests?
Of course we did, but here's what your research doesn't capture: auto-scaling takes time. Our pods needed 45 seconds to spin up, another 30 seconds for the JVM to warm up. By then, we'd already lost thousands of potential customers to timeouts.
And that's the real cost nobody talks about. Not just the infrastructure cost, but the opportunity cost. How much business did you lose that day?
We tracked it: $127,000 in potential loan applications that didn't complete. That was 8% of our quarterly pipeline, gone in 4 hours because we optimized our resource allocation.
But surely pre-scaling would have solved this. You could have increased your baseline capacity before the launch.
Jordan, stop. Just stop. You're proving Riley's point. Pre-scaling for a 40x spike would have cost them $8,000 for the month. That's 160% of their entire infrastructure budget.
Exactly, and what if TechCrunch hadn't picked us up? What if it was only 2x traffic instead of 40x? We'd have burned through our Series A runway 2 months faster.
Okay, you're both right. The research assumes you have budget flexibility, but only 30% of surveyed organizations knew where their cloud budget was going exactly. Most companies are operating blind.
This is fascinating. We're seeing the difference between theory and practice in real time. Alex, you work with companies across the spectrum. What patterns do you see?
Honestly, most companies fall into 2 camps. They either massively over-provision because they're terrified of going down, or they under-provision because they're trying to hit profitability targets. 41% of companies cite lack of needed skills as the biggest cloud waste factor.
And both strategies will kill you. Over-provision and you burn cash. Under-provision and you lose customers. It's like threading a needle while riding a roller coaster with a $50,000 monthly burn rate breathing down your neck.
Wait, but what about Google's GKE Autopilot? It has a flat fee of $0.10 hour per cluster and handles scaling automatically. That seems perfect for startups.
Google Autopilot charges $0 and 445 cents per vCPU per hour. For a startup running even 20 vCPUs continuously, that's $655 per month just for compute. Again, you're thinking like someone with Google's budget.
Plus, and this is important, Autopilot only works if you can predict your resource needs. Our loan applications spiked whenever someone mentioned us on Hacker News. Totally random, totally unpredictable.
That's actually a really good point. Most machine learning models assume some level of pattern recognition. Viral content and PR spikes are inherently unpredictable events.
So we've established that the current solutions don't work for most real-world scenarios. What actually works for companies that aren't Netflix?
Circuit breakers and graceful degradation. Instead of trying to handle every possible spike, you design your system to fail elegantly. We built a simple queue system that would defer non-critical loan processing during high traffic.
Riley's talking about something that actually works at scale. Netflix spends $9.6 million per month on AWS, but their approach to circuit breakers can be applied to a $5,000 monthly budget.
Wait, so instead of scaling to meet demand, you scale your expectations? That's counterintuitive but actually brilliant from a cost perspective.
Exactly. When we hit capacity instead of crashing, we'd show a high-volume message and queue loan applications for processing within 24 hours. Users understood, and our conversion rate only dropped 12%.
And the business impact was minimal because the core transaction flow still worked. You're processing loans, not running a stock exchange. A 30-second delay doesn't kill the business.
This is exactly what my research missed. We optimized for technical metrics, CPU utilization, memory efficiency, not business outcomes. 52% of engineering leaders say the disconnect between FinOps and development teams is leading to wasted spend.
I'm hearing a pattern here. The tools and research assume you have enterprise budgets and predictable workloads, but most companies are actually operating in chaos mode.
That's because the tools are built by FAANG companies for FAANG problems. When Google releases Autopilot, they're solving Google's challenges, not your scrappy startup's challenges.
And then consultants come in and try to apply those solutions everywhere. I've seen 3-person startups implementing microservices architectures because some AWS solutions architect said it would scale better.
Okay, but here's what I don't understand. If these solutions don't work for most companies, why do they keep implementing them? Why is the waste getting worse?
Because VCs and executives read the same TechCrunch articles. They see Netflix makes over $15 billion in yearly revenue with smart scaling, and think they need the same infrastructure.
It's cargo cult engineering. Copy the surface-level practices without understanding the underlying context. Netflix has problems most companies would love to have, like too much money to spend on infrastructure.
Let's pause here for a moment. When we come back, I want to dive into what actually works for the 99% of companies that aren't Netflix. This episode was brought to you by Unstruct AI, creating the most trusted AI news analysis platform, with a focus on the human cost. After all, progress without humanity isn't progress at all. We're back, and we've established that most Kubernetes resource management advice doesn't work for most companies. So what does work? Riley, you mentioned circuit breakers and graceful degradation. What else?
Start with monitoring that actually matters to your business. Don't track CPU utilization, track loan application completion rate, user sign-up success, payment processing time. Build a dashboard your CEO can understand.
That's brilliant because it aligns technical metrics with business metrics. Your CEO doesn't care if CPU is at 80%, but they absolutely care if loan applications are timing out during your busiest hours.
But how do you set the thresholds? At what point do you scale up versus gracefully degrade? It takes an average of 31 days to identify and eliminate cloud waste using traditional methods.
A/B testing, but for infrastructure. We'd randomly route 10% of traffic to degraded mode during normal hours and measure the impact. Turns out, conversion rates only dropped 3% even with the loan approval process delayed by 2 hours.
So you're saying it's cheaper to lose 3% of customers during spikes than to provision for 40x capacity. That's actually really smart financial engineering for a startup.
This is completely changing how I think about this problem. Instead of optimizing for technical perfection, you're optimizing for business resilience within budget constraints.
What about the developers? How do you get them to write code that degrades gracefully? Only 32% of developers have fully automated practices to enforce cost savings.
Feature flags everywhere. Every new feature gets wrapped in a flag that can be disabled instantly. We made it part of our code review process. No PR gets merged without a kill switch. No exceptions.
And you gamify it. We set up a leaderboard showing which teams built the most resilient features during load. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be the team that could handle traffic spikes without burning budget.
That's fascinating. You're using behavioral psychology to drive technical architecture decisions, and the cost savings are measurable, no more guesswork about resource needs.
The best part, our infrastructure costs became predictable. We knew exactly what we'd spend each month because we designed the system to stay within our $4,800 AWS budget, no matter what.
Which is what CFOs actually care about. Not optimal resource utilization, predictable costs, and reliable revenue. Only 30% of organizations knew where their cloud budget was going exactly before implementing these practices.
This conversation has been eye-opening. Jordan, how has this changed your perspective on your research?
Completely. I've been optimizing for the wrong variables. I need to start measuring business outcomes, not just technical metrics. Riley, would you be willing to collaborate on a follow-up study focusing on companies with under $10K monthly cloud spend?
Absolutely. But let's study companies that are actually struggling with this stuff, not just the success stories. Let's talk to the teams that got fired because their Kubernetes cluster went down during a product launch.
And let's focus on actionable insights. What can a startup with 2 engineers actually implement tomorrow without spending 3 months reading Kubernetes documentation?
That sounds like a future episode waiting to happen. Any final thoughts for our listeners who are dealing with these challenges right now?
Don't try to be Netflix. Build for your reality, not someone else's. And always have a plan for when things go wrong, because they will go wrong at the worst possible moment.
Measure what matters to your business, not what the latest Cloud-Native Computing Foundation blog post says you should measure. Revenue beats vanity metrics every single time.
And be skeptical of academic research that doesn't include context about company size, budget constraints, and real-world trade-offs. Especially mine. I clearly had some blind spots.
Jordan, Alex, Riley, thank you for a genuinely enlightening discussion. This is exactly the kind of practical wisdom our listeners need to hear.
Thanks for having us, Sam. And remember, folks, if your monitoring doesn't wake you up at 3 a.m. when revenue is dropping, you're monitoring the wrong things.
Until next time, stay resilient, stay profitable, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, especially when you're burning $50K a month.
And question everything, especially when it comes from academics like me who have never had to explain a $15,000 surprise AWS bill to a panicked founder at 2 a.m.
This has been Unstruct AI, where we dig into the real stories behind the tech headlines. Until next time.